So this is a quick video on Holley power valves and how they work and how to test them to see if they're actually calibrated correctly or if they're ruptured. So first up, what is a Holley power valve? So it is a fuel enrichment system. And so how it works is there's a diaphragm in here, a rubber diaphragm. And as there's a vacuum signal from your carb on your main or secondary metering blocks, it pulls this diaphragm in. So see that diaphragm moving? So pretend there's a vacuum signal from your carb and it's pulling that diaphragm shut and overcomes this spring. And in there's a seat. See the seat right there? I'll move it up and down. You can kind of see it. So when that diaphragm is pulled in, that seat is closed and no fuel can flow through. And then as your vacuum signal drops under wide open throttle or higher load, there's less of a signal, and so that diaphragm can no longer overcome this spring, which has been calibrated, and that seat will release like that. When that seat releases, it lets extra fuel flow through. And so why would you run a power valve? Well, typically for street applications, your jet sizes are not square. So pretend this is the main metering block, and say you have 75s in the front, and you might have that on camera 82s in the secondaries. And so these aren't squared. So you need additional fuel under load to enrich the main circuit to match the secondary. And so a power valve typically adds 6 to 8 jet sizes to square it up. And so I want to show you how you can actually test to see if these are good or not. Wait, but before we do that, I want to show you on sizing. So they come in different sizes, typically in half inches of mercury. So they're never a 10 or 11. They're always 10 and a half, 9 and a half, 7 and a half, yada, yada, yada. And so the typical Holley instructions for on how to accurately size these is to look at your idle vacuum reading from your carb. And so say if you're looking at your idle reading in gear, if you're automatic, you saw 20 on your vacuum gauge, you would divide by 2, which would be 10, and then round up to the nearest half size, so 10 and a half. And so say if you saw 15 on your vacuum gauge, divide by 2, that'd be a 7.5, and they do make a 7.5, so you just run a 7.5. The other theory is to look at your cruise vacuum and then subtract 1 or 2 vacuum sizes from that. So if you were at, say, 11 or 12 vacuum, subtract 2 would give you a 10. Or if you're at 9 at your cruise, subtract 2 would give you a 7. But then you always go up to the next half size, so it'd be 7.5. And so I want to show you how you can test to see if these are accurate, because I've bought some eBay ones. And sometimes these eBay ones don't have any sizings on them. And so like this one in particular, there's no sizing on it. You can't tell what size it is. Sometimes they'll stamp the vacuum sizing on the sides. On this one, there's none. If you look at this other eBay one, this one does have a stamp. You can see there's a 6 and a 5. I'm going to turn it this way, right side up. It's a 6.5. So this is a 6.5 power valve. Like I said, the Holley ones are a lot more readable. And they just flat out tell you, hey, it's a 10.5, 10.5, and then here's another eBay knockoff with nothing on it. So the way you could test these is if you can use a hand vacuum pump. This one is from Harbor Freight, and just put the rubber gasket on here and pump it a few times. And if your vacuum gauge doesn't move, like this one, you know the power valve's good. And so how can you validate that the spring has been calibrated correctly to the reading? Well, stick the gauge on here and pump it up. And as I'm pumping it, see, avoid the reflection here. You can see as I'm pumping, that seat's coming down right there. So we get close to the 10.5. We're not quite there. We're at 9, call it 8. There's 10. Saw the seat move a lot right there. So at 10.5, it's basically closed. So this one's accurate. And it should be because it came from Holley. And so the seat's closed, and then if I release it, you'll see that spring bounce up, the seat come up, or release the vacuum on it, pop up. So that one's good. And so here we'll test this one which I bought in a multi-pack, but none of them are labeled, and they're all different sizes supposedly. So I think this one is a 7.5. So again, I'll put a vacuum on it, and we'll pump it up, and you can see the seat. I'm watching the seat move here. I know it's a little bit blurry. I'm trying to calibrate it here. So that's 7, 6 actually. I'm pumping here, 7. See the seat coming down. You kind of tap on it, and if you feel a little bit of movement, you know you're not quite there. And then there is fully closed, and I'm at what's that, 9, so it should be closed by then. But yeah, so this one is accurate. It's at 7.5. I'll call it 7.5. So here I have the 6.5, and this one's actually blown. And you really can't tell on it just by visually looking at it. But if you put it up on this gauge here, and we'll pump it up to 15, you see it loses a vacuum. There's a rupture in there, very tiny one. It won't hold a vacuum though. So what will happen is they'll just dump fuel constantly when you don't need it, and you're going to run super rich. And typically the newer Holley carbs have power valve protectors, so I'm not sure how this one actually blown. It's just maybe it's just junk from the factory to begin with. I didn't really test it. I haven't actually ran it yet, but you can see this one's just no good. I run the other eBay knockoff that's a 7.5 supposedly. Pump it up. It's all good. It holds its reading. And test the 10.5 again. The Holley one holds its reading. All good. So yeah, thanks for watching.